This is a general how to heal with Atonement guide. If you want to know all the specifics that go on with the stats and gear, click the link to the appropriate guide. That being said, this guide will continue on the basis that you are reforged correctly, you have the Glyph of Penance, and that you have the talents Solace and Power Infusion. Now, with the recent patch, Atonement was nerfed, but it's still viable and a fun way to heal. The nerf brought down Atonement healing from 100% of the damage done to only 90%. Plus, it removed the part where the Glyph of Smite would increase the damage of Smite by 20% when Holy Fire was on the target. They didn't actually remove that glyph, but they just reduced the actual healing it provided. Also, the damage of Penance was reduced by 10%. So essentially, they nerfed Smite healing by 30% and Penance by 20%. On fights with damage increases, like Jinrock and Horadon, you will still be hitting the Atonement cap easily. For those of you that don't know, the Atonement will only heal up to 30% of the priest's maximum health before healing modifiers. So if your health is about 450k, Atonement can only heal a maximum of 135k before the healing increase effects. Now, for Atonement healing, you cannot just use Smite, Solace, and Penance. Your HPS will be terrible if you only use those three spells. Disc Priests are complex and require a lot of cooldown management. For one, you want to use Prayer of Mending off cooldown. That spell is so efficient for its mana cost, it's crazy. Use it wisely for certain situations, but for the most part you can just throw it on the tank that's currently taking damage to have it bounce around. What I do is if both tanks are taking damage, I'll use Bubble on one and Mending on the other, because Mending won't jump if the damage is absorbed through Power Word Shield. Also, use Bubble off cooldown, or more specifically, keep Rapture off cooldown. Rapture with enough spirit is a pretty decent chunk of extra mana throughout the fight, and should not be ignored. Inner Focus, of course, should be used when it's needed. It's great for stacking phases and for throwing out a huge heal, and Bubble on the tank that's taking extra damage, or just for a prayer of healing to guarantee a crit on everyone. Now onto the Atonement part. Atonement is a smart heal, so it's way better than all the other heals. If a DPS accidentally stands in fire, you would have already healed them the moment his health went down, before the other healers could even react. It's also a great heal for spot healing, and for raid healing, when you're spread out, and taking major damage like on Tortoris or that one bird boss. Now, Penance is your big heal. Each tick of Penance hits harder than a Smite, and it hits 3 times in a row, so Penance is your #1 priority. Solace should be kept off cooldown after Penance. It hits about as hard as Smite, but it's instant cast and puts a small dot, and does a tiny bit of extra healing. It also heals for the full amount it hits for, instead of only 90% like Smite and Penance. Smite reduces the cooldown of Penance by half a second every time you use it, and will be the spell you cast the most. Use Power Infusion off cooldown for Atonement, unless you really need to save it for heavy damage, which you do on a couple of fights. But I would say about 80% of the time you can go ahead and just pop it right off the bat. You want to get 5 stacks of Evangelism, and you do want to use Archangel. It buffs your heals by 25% for its 18-second duration. And remember, this increase goes above the Atonement cap. But using Archangel off cooldown is not always optimal. You see, Archangel also increases the healing and absorption of all your heals, including Power Word Shield and Spirit Shell. So you always want to have it ready when you're about to do some heavy healing, like going to stack during Rampage, or before using Cascade. Also, if the damage is pretty lackluster and you're at 5 stacks and the cooldown is up, you actually save mana by not using it. And I mean, like, only the tank is taking damage and there is no other damage at all. It happens from time to time. If the damage is moderate, use it off cooldown, unless you need to save it for something coming up soon. And just Penance, Solace, Smite, and use Bubble and Prayer Mending off cooldown. If the damage is high and everyone is close to each other, stop using Atonement and spam Prayer of Healing and pop Archangel, Spirit Shell, Power Infusion if you have it. And make sure to use Prayer of Mending off cooldown, even during high damage. Or I should say especially during high damage. That spell heals for a ton. Also, Bubble for Rapture procs to get Hasted Prayer of Healing. Now, if it's heavy damage and everyone is spread out, Archangel, Power Infuse, and Atonement heal like there's no tomorrow. That's one of the things Atonement is good at, super fast spot healing. Disprace do not have a quick raid save like Holy Priests and Druids and Monks do, but Atonement smart heals can save lives because they will hit everyone who is within range of the target. Now to recap, Archangel is your friend, Penance is your best friend, and Prayer of Mending is awesome, so do not ignore it. If you want to know why I say use Solace over Mindbender, or to know anything else about Atonement Priest, check out the links for the other videos.